Morning arrived without emphasis. Low cloud rested across the roofs of the administrative quarter, reducing distance until the far buildings appeared pressed against one another. Moisture remained on the cobblestones where night air had cooled more quickly than the ground beneath it. Footsteps carried a muted sound, absorbed by damp stone. A cart moved along the street and then passed from view, leaving the space unchanged. Nothing suggested urgency, only continuation. Inside one of the offices, windows admitted a thin gray light that revealed dust gathered along the edges of a desk. Papers lay arranged in deliberate order, their corners aligned beneath a metal weight. A coat hung from a wooden stand near the door, the fabric stiff where rain had dried unevenly. The room held the stillness of routine work performed early, before conversation began. Outside, somewhere beyond the courtyard, a door closed with controlled force. In the years when administrative authority expanded across occupied territories, decisions rarely announced themselves with visible drama. Orders moved through channels shaped by procedure rather than spectacle. Signatures accumulated at the bottom of documents whose language avoided excess. Distances between command and consequence remained measured in paperwork, transport schedules, and the quiet efficiency of offices removed from the places most affected. Reinhard Heydrich operated within this environment of structured movement and restrained communication. His position placed him close to systems designed to classify, monitor, and reorganize civilian populations across large regions of Europe. Yet the immediate surroundings of his work often appeared ordinary. Desks, telephones, files, corridors where footsteps echoed without urgency. The scale of authority was not visible in the furniture. It existed instead in the direction documents traveled after leaving the room. Those who encountered him in professional settings later described an atmosphere marked less by overt intensity than by precision. Conversations remained brief. Questions focused on timing, numbers, and jurisdiction. Tone rarely rose. Decisions appeared to proceed from calculation rather than visible emotion. Such restraint created distance, making interpretation difficult even for those standing nearby. Travel between cities followed predictable patterns shaped by rail schedules and military transport. Stations carried the smell of coal and wet clothing. Officers waited beside civilians whose destinations differed but whose silence felt similar. Movement across territory occurred frequently, yet each arrival produced another interior space resembling the last. Offices arranged for efficiency, guarded entrances, rooms prepared for meetings that seldom lasted long. Beyond these administrative centers, conditions unfolded differently. Towns under occupation adjusted to regulations that changed without clear explanation. Curfews shortened evenings. Identification papers determined movement. Notices appeared on walls and then disappeared, replaced by revised instructions. Daily life continued within narrowing boundaries defined by authority that remained largely unseen. In rural districts, fields required tending regardless of political transformation. Farmers rose before daylight, measuring seasons rather than decrees. Yet even there, absence became noticeable. Neighbors relocated, shops closed, letters unanswered. Explanations circulated quietly, seldom confirmed. Silence carried information more effectively than speech. Reports compiled by security offices translated such realities into language stripped of context. Populations became numbers. Locations reduced to coordinates. Actions summarized in short phrases designed for rapid transmission. The process did not require raised voices. It depended instead on consistency, repetition, and the assumption that procedure itself justified continuation. Meetings in conference rooms rarely revealed the human weight of these abstractions. Chairs scraped against floors. Papers shifted from one hand to another. Coffee cooled beside untouched cups. Discussion centered on logistics, transport capacity, administrative responsibility, timelines extending weeks or months ahead. Participants recorded outcomes and then dispersed into separate corridors, each carrying fragments of a larger structure. Outside these buildings, Weather changed without reference to policy. Rain settled into soil already disturbed by movement of vehicles. Winter arrived early in some regions, slowing transport and increasing demand for fuel that remained scarce. Civilians adapted as they could, repairing roofs, sharing food, waiting for letters that sometimes arrived and sometimes did not. Their routines persisted beside systems that rarely acknowledged individual lives. Within Heydrich's sphere of authority, documentation expanded steadily. Files multiplied, filling cabinets arranged according to categories that grew more complex over time. Clerks copied names with careful handwriting. Mistakes required correction in ink that never fully matched the original line. Accuracy mattered, though the reasons extended far beyond the page. Those tasked with implementing directives often experienced the work as procedural rather than ideological. Trains required scheduling. Guards required assignment. Inventories required counting. Each step appeared limited in scope, connected to the next through administrative necessity rather than visible intent. Responsibility dispersed across departments until no single location contained the whole. Resistance existed, though not always in forms easily recorded. Delays occurred. Information moved slowly. Warnings passed quietly between individuals who trusted one another enough to risk speech. Such actions rarely altered broader systems, yet they revealed awareness beneath enforced routine. Silence could conceal both compliance and refusal. In occupied cities, certain buildings acquired reputations understood without explanation. People walked past them with lowered voices. Windows remained closed even in warm weather. Guards stood at entrances whose purpose required no sign. Inside, interrogation and detention followed procedures documented carefully yet seldom witnessed by those outside. Knowledge traveled through rumor rather than record. Heydrich's authority extended across many of these structures, though his physical presence remained intermittent. Orders traveled more frequently than the man himself. When he did arrive, surroundings adjusted, rooms prepared, schedules cleared, conversations shortened. After departure, routine resumed, leaving only minor disturbances in otherwise continuous procedure. The cumulative effect of such administration emerged gradually. Communities thinned. Transport routes carried passengers who did not return. Property changed hands through legal mechanisms that appeared orderly on paper. Distance separated action from consequence, allowing daily work to proceed without interruption from visible suffering. Systems functioned precisely because they transformed violence into process. For those observing from within the bureaucracy, clarity proved elusive. Each document addressed a limited concern. Each meeting resolved a specific question. The broader pattern remained difficult to perceive, concealed by the very structure that enabled it. Understanding required distance few possessed at the time. When Heydrich was later wounded in an attack carried out by resistance fighters, response unfolded through channels already familiar. Orders issued, reprisals organized, reports compiled. The violence that followed did not erupt spontaneously. It moved through established systems capable of rapid escalation once authorized. Villages suffered consequences determined far from their streets, decisions transmitted with administrative efficiency resembling earlier directives. Even then, daily routines continued elsewhere. Offices opened. Trains departed. Clerks recorded figures. The machinery of governance did not pause to acknowledge individual death, whether of a high official or an unnamed civilian. Continuity remained its defining characteristic. After Heydrich's death, structures he had shaped persisted beyond him. Authority transferred to others. Procedures remained intact. Documents continued to circulate. Personal absence altered little within systems designed for endurance. Responsibility dispersed across institutions rather than resting in a single figure. As the war moved toward its conclusion, collapse arrived unevenly. Front lines shifted. Communication faltered. Supplies diminished. Yet administrative habits endured surprisingly long, sustained by individuals accustomed to routine even when outcomes grew uncertain. Only when defeat became unavoidable did the paperwork slow, leaving incomplete files and unanswered correspondence. In the aftermath, investigators attempted to reconstruct events from surviving records. They encountered gaps created by destruction, concealment, or simple loss. Testimony varied. Memory proved selective. Still, patterns emerged, evidence of coordination, intention, and scale difficult to attribute solely to circumstance. Bureaucratic language, once neutral in tone, revealed implications when read alongside consequence. For communities that had lived under occupation, understanding developed differently. Knowledge came through absence, through names not spoken, through places avoided long after guards had gone. Memory attached itself to streets, buildings, and landscapes altered by events no longer visible. Reconstruction repaired physical damage without restoring what had disappeared. In later decades, historians approached Heydrich's role with measured analysis rather than immediate emotion. Archives expanded. Documents once scattered became accessible. Interpretation relied on accumulation of evidence rather than singular narrative. The resulting picture emphasized systems as much as individuals, recognizing how authority functioned through organization rather than personality alone. Yet personal memory persisted alongside scholarly study. Survivors recalled fragments, sounds in corridors, the weight of waiting, the uncertainty of each day. Their accounts rarely followed clear structure. They reflected experience shaped by confusion and fear rather than retrospective clarity. Together, these memories formed a counterpoint to administrative precision. The crimes associated with Heydrich therefore resist simple description. They did not consist solely of visible acts of violence, though such acts occurred. They included the creation and maintenance of systems that allowed destruction to proceed methodically, often at a distance from those directing it. Horror emerged not only from brutality but from order. By the time Europe entered a period of relative stability, many physical traces had altered or vanished. Buildings changed purpose. Offices closed. Documents settled into archives rarely visited by the public. What remained most enduring was less tangible: the knowledge that ordinary environments had once supported extraordinary harm without obvious disruption. Even now, landscapes connected to those years appear quiet. Roads carry routine traffic. Windows reflect contemporary light. Nothing in the present surface reveals the full weight of earlier decisions. Understanding depends on memory, record, and the willingness to look beyond appearance. Evening settles gradually, much as morning once arrived, without emphasis. Air cools. Sounds diminish. Rooms fill with shadow that conceals detail without removing it. The past remains present in this way, not visible at every moment, yet never entirely absent. What endures from the history surrounding Reinhard Heydrich is therefore not a single scene or decisive gesture. It is the recognition that destruction can proceed through ordinary structures maintained by routine effort. It is the awareness that silence, paperwork, and distance may carry consequences equal to more visible forms of violence. No final statement resolves this understanding. It remains incomplete, carried forward quietly, like memory itself.